This next slide, which is something straight out of the Urantia book, and it's the organization of the super universes on page 167. And this particular page is something that probably most Urantia book readers are well familiar with, but haven't made any effort to memorize, and I'm not suggesting that anyone bother to try to memorize this page, but it's actually pretty simple because we all know the system of which Urantia is one of, 606. A system embraces about 1,000 worlds. At the very end of the list, a super universe consists of 10 major sectors. Everything else in the middle is multiplications of the hundreds. So at the bottom we have 1,000. 1,000 inhabited worlds makes a system, and at the top we have 10 major sectors making up a super universe, and every other grouping within is by the 100s. So it isn't really that difficult. The question here is, how do we make a relationship between these terms and what astronomy understands? What I'm going to do right at the beginning of the talk, and this is something that I used to hold till the end of the talk, but I think it's useful to give you a glimpse as to where we're going to go with the talk. And the glimpse is that I want you to imagine that a super universe of 1,000 minor sectors, so a super universe has 10 major sectors, 100 minor sectors, which is 1,000 minor sectors, is the equivalent of a super cluster of about 1,000 galaxies, which is commonly seen in the night sky. So think of Milky Way, which is the minor sector ENSA within the Virgo supercluster or super universe of Warventon. Continuing with this idea, here's a very important point of the talk. I am drawing parallels between what astronomy is looking at and what the Urantia book is talking about. I'm not insisting that the conclusions I'm coming to are the exact conclusions to make. But what I am doing is saying that there are really wonderful parallels with what astronomy looks at and what the Urantia book says. So there is really not the need to feel as confused as Urantia book readers have often felt by the terminology and the cosmology in the book. So that's really the point. And just quickly what we're going to do here, this is in this next slide. I'm drawing closer parallels with where we're going to end up in the talk, and I don't want you to try to memorize this now. But again, at the top we have the understanding that in the Urantia book the term master universe is used to refer to the universe as we currently use the term. Super universe refers to a supercluster. A major sector in the Urantia book would refer to something like the Virgo cluster of galaxies. A minor sector would be equivalent to our own Milky Way galaxy. That's where we're going to go, and that's what I have to walk you through to get you there. Finally, this image we're going to return to also. This is only the first time that we're going to see these slides. Here we have an image of Urantia and the Milky Way at the middle of the local group of galaxies, surrounded by these colorized images of superclusters of galaxies. And these superclusters, maybe call them super universes, are in motion. And they are all in motion around this image here of the Great Attractor. So we're going to end up here. This is where we're going to end up. The conclusions that I want to walk you to are not brand new conclusions. We've had other great minds who are Urantia book readers in the past. Dan Massey and Erwin Ginsberg were really hot on the idea that a minor sector would be equivalent to a galaxy. So I'm not extending something new here. I'm just coming at it from a different way, and I'm expanding the context in which it exists. And I also want to say this about the term universe. As we're looking at this image of superclusters of galaxies surrounding our own Milky Way, it looks enormous, and in fact it is an extremely tiny part of the universe as it's understood. And as I use the term universe to help you get a handle on the idea that we carry baggage into reading the Urantia book when we use the term universe. The term universe, meaning everything, has only been in common use since about the 1940s as a term. We are now in the early 2000s, and guess what? You may not realize it, but the term universe is falling out of disfavor. And we're moving into the terminology that uses the term multiverse. So the term universe has had a 70-year lifespan, and we're about to leave it behind. So the everything image that we've taken for granted And that's what people, that's what as Urantia book readers do. We walk into reading the Urantia book with our language, taking for granted an understanding, and it really is problematic. It's baggage that we need to be able to set aside when we read. Here is something real important that the Urantia book says about itself.
Limitations of revelation. Because your world is generally ignorant of origins, even of physical origins, it has appeared to be wise from time to time to provide instruction in cosmology, and always has this made trouble for the future. The laws of revelation hamper us greatly by their prescription of the impartation of unearned or premature knowledge. Any cosmology presented as a part of revealed religion is destined to be outgrown in a very short time. Accordingly, future students of such a revelation are tempted to discard any element of genuine religious truth it may contain because they discover errors on the face of the associated cosmologies therein presented. So,
we have a problem. And the problem is that the religious truth of most religious systems has really withstood the test of time. And the cosmologies may have been lacking, but the truth underlying them is really what's of the essence. Now, the Revelatory Commission knows we needed a Urantia book-sized vision of the universe, and we needed it now. And they didn't want to wait 1 second to give it to us, but they had to wait a little bit. And they realized at the time that it wouldn't entirely meet the scrutiny of science as it's currently being discovered, but they gave us what they could give us, and we needed it when we needed it. Okay, so what we're going to do here is move on to something real important, and that is the Urantia book self-admittedly says that the Revelatory Commission was constrained to use 1,000 of the highest concepts pre-existing at the time that the book appeared. And this is one of those books, The Architecture of the Universe. And Matthew Block was the first one to identify this book, as he has identified many, many, many books since then. And Steve Dreyer is also. And so my talk will rely in some measure on the content of The Architecture of the Universe. Because it is full of all kinds of great things. And the very first thing we're going to look at is this quote. And The Architecture of the Universe, by the way, is written in 1934.
Let anyone think of the universe as complex as our own, with that extraordinary cleverness and beauty of design which we observe. Let him think of the problem before him in trying to say something about it to relatively simple-minded people. He will have to give that abstract in very popular form. He will have to use analogies and the like, but you may say that it is undignified to put the truth in the light of analogies, and will claim that that which is written should necessarily be the literal truth. Alas, what do you mean by literal truth? I will venture to say that there is hardly anything which you can describe to me in which you do not unconsciously use analogies. Many of us will use quite knowingly an obsolete model for the purpose of discussing certain phenomena. One must guard against a supposed impregnable reality in many of the things which seem so obviously real to our consciousness.
Yeah, isn't this wonderful? This is absolutely wonderful. It's almost as though somebody was looking over somebody else's shoulder here. You know, the Revelatory Commission was looking over this guy's shoulder, or he'd been talking to them without knowing it, because this is exactly how the Urantia book was written when it was written. So here's an example of how the Urantia book is the universe by analogy.
The immensity of the far-flung creation of the Universal Father is utterly beyond the grasp of finite imagination. The enormousness of the Master Universe staggers the concept of even my order of being. But the mortal mind can be taught much about the plan and arrangement of the universes. You can know something of their physical organization and marvelous administration. You may learn much about the various groups of intelligent beings who inhabit the 7 super-universes of time and the central universe of eternity.
Our imaginations are not up to the size of the universe. We use terms like galaxy, and we try to pretend to ourselves that we really understand that what we have, the term we've used is something we really know what it means. But when you're talking millions and billions of objects, we're kidding ourselves. The universe is staggeringly huge, and yet the Revelatory Commission has given us the Urantia book and this staggeringly huge vision, knowing that we really can absorb something. And as Urantia book readers, we know why, because we have within us this indwelling Spirit of God, and we have a superconsciousness that's capable of absorbing content that's far beyond anything our conscious minds can embrace. So we really are feeding ourselves, images that will last in eternity with the Urantia book. But this is the universe by analogy. We are given analogical images to work with. Now, from page 1 of The Architecture of the Universe, this is really sweet.
It has always been one of the alluring games of mankind to speculate upon the why and wherefore of this universe of ours, to seek the explanation of things, the fundamental cause of it all. If the period from the dawn of history be shrunk into a day, we shall find that the first 23 hours of that day are barren, for it is only in the last hour that science was born. And even as the human child develops in its struggle, so in the last 10 minutes of its existence, in the last 35 years of actual time, it has outshone all the achievements of its youth, and has torn from nature more of her secrets than she had vouchsafed to man in the whole previous history of existence. And why has this great revelation been so long delayed?
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? Why has this great revelation been so long delayed? Well, embedded within the paragraph is we cannot take for granted what an explosion of scientific understanding took place. Again, this book is being written in 1934, and in the previous 50 years, there was an explosion from a pre-scientific era to a scientific era in all fields of science. So why, in this case, this is one of the examples that I use, and as an astronomer, why was this great revolution so long delayed?